it's our job, our responsibility to decide whether or not that talk is helping us, hindering us, is it getting us to where we want to be? It's very easy to sit there and look at other people and be like, well, it's easy for Dinesh because insert reason, insert reason, insert reason.
Right. Is this negative self-talk is getting in your way of the full experience of life? We are thinking more about ourselves than other people are thinking about us.
I suck, or I'm falling short. Well, that's just one way of looking at things. What else might be true? So every morning I wake up and I think some version of you're falling short. And it doesn't matter, what I have accomplished in the past week, the past day. Dinesh, I just wake up and I think like you've messed up, or, ooh, you're already behind schedule. And I think that a lot of people allow themselves to think this and believe it and let that rule the rest of your day. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I think, there was a study that I read recently that said 30% of people have no inner dialogue, right? They don't have a conversation running on in their head. But if that's 30% that don't have that inner dialogue, that means 70% of us have an inner dialogue. And that's the majority of us across all walks of life, across all industries, across all professions. And most of that inner dialogue is actually based or grounded in a negative self-bias. And what do I mean by negative self-bias? It's exactly what you said. It is thoughts that we have on repeat that we have internalized or created, designed to keep us safe from failure or experiencing failure, right?
Yeah. In my book, I talk about them as the inner guards. And because that's exactly what they are. They're guards. They're meant to keep us safe, rooted in the best of intentions. But, it's kind of like, so we have a family dog. It's not our dog, but a family dog that is just hyper anxious all the time. And, a bird could fly by and this poor dog is just barking and barking and barking. And he's this big. But it exhausts him, right? And there's no real threat. It's just like a squirrel outside or whatever. The neighbors pulling out of their own driveway. And he's just on guard and he thinks he has to protect himself and us and the house. And then 5 minutes later, after he's finally calmed down, he passes out. Right. But that's what that dialogue can be like for those of us who have, like for the 70% of us who listen to that inner dialogue or have that inner dialogue. But my question to you is, how many of us who of that 70% on default subconsciously just believe that that's the blind truth, right? Like this negative self-talk is the truth and there's no other way about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think for most of my life, I thought hearing words like negative self-talk was sort of this woo-woo mumbo jumbo type of stuff. But once you start paying attention to it and you start observing it in yourself, you can start to observe it in other people. And I tell you, Seema, it doesn't matter who I'm talking to, what their socioeconomic status is, what their educational background is, what their profession is. The negative self-talk is so sneaky and it's so fast and it's so believable that people will just run with it like reality until you pump the brakes and say, whoa, 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 did you just hear yourself say that? And then once you highlight it or once you name it, then people are like, well, they're quick to realize that that's not really what they meant or what they think or anything like that. So I think you're absolutely right. So many of us are on default, but it's very difficult for us to admit that we're being controlled by that negative self-talk because we don't even see it.
Right. Exactly. And I think that this negative self-talk, your guards or your saboteur, your critic, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of terms out there, your ego, that is what constantly is blocking us and getting in that's what's allowing ourselves to get in our own way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I think, we're placing the responsibility squarely on our shoulders, that it's our negative self-talk, it is getting in our way. But I think it's important to highlight that we downloaded that from largely positive, motivated instances in our life, right? So I'll give you an example. When I moved from Guyana to St. Augustine, I was in the sixth grade. Um, I was supposed to be in the fifth grade, but I skipped a grade. I was in the sixth grade.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to seventh grade. And in eighth grade, I took a pre algebra course. And I did horribly in it, like so badly that I failed it. And I didn't quite fail. I think I got like a D minus or something. It was enough
We're
to,
brown. That's a failure.
yeah, totally. And it was enough to like pass the class, but like, bro, you didn't really do the work.
It's not
So
100.
yeah, so then we went to high school, right? Eighth grade, ninth grade, high school. And the plan was that you took pre-algebra in eighth grade, you would take algebra in ninth grade.
Mm-hmm.
And 90% of my friends went on to take algebra. And that was not cool because now I was a failure. I was being held back.
Yeah.
I wasn't with my friends any longer. And in fact, at the new school, that meant I would be in a class with kids I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember pleading with my parents to go to the school and tell them and convince them that I passed this class and that I should be in algebra. And out of the goodness and best intentions, and it's something I would do today with my kids, I would say to my son, just like my parents said to me, maybe you should just repeat pre-algebra. It's not that bad. Like, you need to learn the foundations before you move on. I think it's important that you repeat pre-algebra.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my parents having that conversation with me,
Mm-hmm.
saying, no, don't go on to algebra. It might be too much for you. We want to set you up for success. Take pre-algebra. And so all of that was good. There was no malice. There was no misintention or anything like that. But some part of me held on to that, wow, you don't think I'm good enough to do algebra.
Even though that's not what they said.
Even though that's not what they said.
Right.
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 And so the reason I share this story is to highlight that a lot of this negative self-talk are from that we've downloaded or we've internalized from, seemingly good or wholehearted or, instances where people were trying to do the best for us or that. And then over years that, stays with us. And then the next time you're trying to do something, some part of you might remember, like, well, you weren't good enough to do algebra. Why do you think you should be able to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I ended up doing the pre-algebra course. And then in my sophomore year, I said, I'm going to take algebra and geometry.
Mm-hmm.
The first time a high school student had taken 2 math classes in the same year.
Okay.
So that I can catch up and take algebra 2 with my friends, and then take pre-calculus and then AP calculus with my friends, and graduate at the same pace where we started in 8th grade. And so what I learned through that experience is that to divorce yourself of that negative self-talk, you've got to challenge yourself to do things that only you believe yourself can do.
Oh, yeah, because I think for a lot of parents, the initial reaction is, Arebeta, wait, like, don't, like, hold on, just take one at a time. We want you to excel. And so the best way to do that is to take off little bites and go at the pace that you're on.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I get it. I can only, and it's interesting because even as adults, we carry this talk with us, and it, to your point, shows up in sneaky ways. Listeners, full disclosure, Dinesh and I were just on a conversation a few days ago, and because we have a safe space, he was able to kind of point out to me the sneaky ways that my own negative self-talk was showing up still as an adult. This is an everyday practice. But anyway, my point is, even as adults, this happens, and it's our job, our responsibility to decide whether or not that talk is helping us, hindering us, is it getting us to where we want to be? It's very easy to sit there and look at other people and be like, well, it's easy for Dinesh because insert reason, insert reason, insert reason.
Right.
And for me, though, like, I'm a woman, I'm a brown Indian woman, I have kids, blah, blah, blah. And that's why this is easy for him and it's not easy for me.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, but this is why that diet works for her, but this is not why it's going to work for me. And it's up to us. And so anyway, that's my whole impetus for creating the topic around the show was,
Yeah.
I just know that there are so many people out there who are waking up telling themselves they fell short or they're already messed up. Like, even if I wake up 5 minutes after where I wanted to, I'm like, dang, I'm already 5 minutes, quote unquote, behind.
Right.
And if you don't master the recognition of how you're talking to yourself, you're going to be perpetually on this rat race of trying to catch up. And you never will be able to.
Yeah. And, that is one aspect of what we're talking about, where the inner dialogue is a critic, basically. It's telling you that you're not good enough, you can't do something, you're already behind. Who are you to even stare down the barrel of a camera or to get on a podcast mic or all of those things, right? There's another aspect, which I think is even sneakier and even more insidious, is that this is as good as it's going to get. Or
oh yeah,
things are perfect, they're working well, it is not possible to do something different, right? And if you're listening to this and you're like, man, that sounds like me, and sometimes some of us might think like, wow, why am I guilty of this? Why does that afflict me? I want to share a well-known phenomenon that happened over the last 4 years that afflicted almost every corporation or business on the planet, right? And that is going to remote work. That is restaurants shutting down and making more money from delivery than they did when they were open, right? I mean, if you look at remote work and where it is today, 10 years ago, people would have told you it wasn't possible. And not because of the easy answer, the technology wasn't there, or we didn't have Zoom or things like that. A lot of it, if you read the articles, a lot of it comes down to we couldn't trust our people to work from home, right? We wouldn't, they wouldn't do the work. Like, they would do their laundry and they would do this and they would do that. And then there was a inflection point and we were forced to make it work. Right? We were forced to make it work. And then before you knew it, you were driving up to Target and people were bringing out your stuff to you, right? And DoorDash and Uber Eats and Zoom. And we all got lighting and cameras in our house and we set up offices and now it does work.
Yeah.
Right. And so both of these aspects, I think, are at play in this topic that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So and just to clarify, like, when I say getting out of your own way, when we say that, getting out of your own way of what, right? Like, we think we want more time and more money, maybe that title. If you don't have children, maybe you're thinking you want kids. If you do have kids, you're maybe thinking like, oh, why can't they get past this phase of like potty training or sleeping through the night or, taking their SATs and going off to college, or, you get a new car and then you're worried about like that thought of like, well, if I park here, it might get scratched up, right? That sneakiness, it seems quote unquote logical. It seems logical to, if you have a brand new car, to be concerned about where you're parking it to make sure that it stays pristine.
Right.
But the reality is that thought in and of itself is what's keeping you from enjoying the car that you worked so hard to procure, right?
Yeah.
When you wish for the good old days and then you're sitting here and you look up and you're like, well, crap, now I'm 40 years old and the good old days are, when I was 30? Like, that doesn't, it's never ending. And so I think it's really important for us when we talk about getting in our own way to recognize how that shows up. Because what I think we really want, Dinesh, is as humans, I think we want love. We want meaning. We want connection, space, like freedom to make choice, inner peace. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think as humans, we want to matter. We want to have meaning. We want to have connection. All of those things. We want to have belonging. We want to belong to something and be part of a group. And when you were sharing that those examples, one of the most casual way that this shows up is in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, I've caught myself introducing Anjana as my better half
Mm-hmm.
until someone stopped me in my tracks and says, "Why does she have to be better than you?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, well, I don't mean that she's better than me. Then why do you need to make yourself less than her
Mm-hmm.
to compliment her?
Right.
Right? Because that's what I'm doing. I'm saying she's great, and in saying she's great, I have to say that she's better than me,
Mm-hmm.
and that somehow is good. But even that is continuously reinforcing some part of you
Mm-hmm.
that is less than its full potential. And ultimately, what we're trying to get at here at the end of the day is this negative self-talk is getting in your way of the full experience of life.
Yeah. Yeah. The self-depreciation, Dinesh, you and I have actually talked about this because there's multiple ways to look at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, for me, self-depreciation does not work, right?
Right.
Like me telling myself, like, you're lazy. You couldn't get up 15 minutes before you were supposed to, or you should have known better, or, insert whatever way of inadequacy of the self, right? Like
Yeah.
you're messing up, you're falling short, you don't know what you're doing. They won't listen to you, whatever. Um, that doesn't work for me.
Right.
You, on the other hand, we've kind of gone back and forth about this. It's a very different perspective,
Mm-hmm.
but I think at the root of it all is how you're saying, I'm not a good lawyer, I'm not a good this, I'm not a good that,
Right.
isn't said with self-depreciation. Like you're
Right.
not really believing that you suck.
Right.
What you're saying is, I have room for improvement.
Absolutely. And I hear this in a lot of people where people will say, "I'm not a good public speaker." And what they do with that is take themselves out of any opportunity for a public speaking, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
won't get on the phone, they won't do a presentation, they won't put themselves in opportunities where they can get experience or even try public speaking to
Mm-hmm.
figure out if they like it enough to improve
Yeah.
it. So you might not be the world's best public speaker, and you may very well be the worst public speaker on the planet today, right? If you're the worst today and you have no prayer of becoming the best, I can concede that to someone. But
Mm-hmm.
what I cannot concede is that it is impossible for you to get better than what you are today.
Right.
And if you continuously on repeat tell yourself, "I'm not a good public speaker," and you never try and you never give yourself the opportunity, we're cutting off the ability to improve a little bit. And by improving a little bit, maybe there is a hidden talent there. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
there is an opportunity to inspire someone else. Maybe there's an opportunity of where just a tad bit better public speaking can really make a difference when it counts.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think the analogy that comes to mind for me is when you have a hot coal in your hand and
Yeah,
you're saying like I'm burning, but you won't put the coal down,
yeah,
right? Like that's negative self-talk. And so when we master how it is that is showing up for us, when we
right.
just recognize that simple act of creating awareness that that's true, that you're hearing it, that's the first step to actually dismantling it and getting rid
Yeah,
of it.
absolutely.
But I will preface this and say it's so much easier to hear the negative self-talk when you're physically and mentally not cared for.
Hmm.
So like if you repeatedly choose to go on less sleep,
Yeah,
eat poorly, not exercise, not experience some sort of connection to a greater purpose in terms of like, is there a relationship in your life that, really matters to you, for example, right? Like not spending time with people you love. Those
hmm,
buckets, if you don't fill them, you're going to be more likely to hear all the ways that you suck.
totally.
right?
Totally. I couldn't agree more. And one of my favorite quotes. I got a lot of favorite quotes, but this is easily top 10. Ready for it?
Sure.
The best bridge between despair and hope is a good night's sleep.
Mm-hmm. It's a good
Right?
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're tired, when you're stressed, when you're feeling um, that the world, and I'll use the word attack, but when the world is against you, it's easy to have the volume on this dialogue be turned all the way up. And that's why I think, taking care of yourself, having the ability to emotionally regulate yourself,
Mm-hmm.
having the ego in check, all of these things, all we talk about them in different episodes, but they all work together. And it's like working out, or it's like brushing your teeth, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a daily practice, and it is catching yourself and reaching out to people and questioning the the thoughts in your head,
Mm-hmm.
and surrounding yourself with people or opportunities to find the falsity in them.
Yeah. Even, it's funny. It happens to everyone. I can't, it made me laugh. Over the holidays, I was reading Spare by Prince
Mm.
Harry.
Yeah.
I highly recommend. I think it's a fantastic book. However you feel about the royals is however you feel about them. Um, but I wanted to read it to kind of get a glimpse into how he thinks and how he, and I've always been a fan of Meghan Markle, and
Yeah.
I've been kind of curious about Harry. And highly recommend for a lot of reasons, but he was talking about this instance where he found himself in Courtney Cox's house,
Mm.
right? And he kind of like was talking about like, oh my gosh, this is Courtney Cox. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, right? Like this is, and it was an almost like, am I good enough sort of, that was my perception of what he was saying, was like, holy crap, there's this woman, I'm in her house, she's amazing, she's super famous. And there was this questioning of his own self-worth in there.
Yeah.
Right? This awkwardness, if you will, to reference back to Hannah Pryor's, The Good Awkward.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, this guy perceptually from the rest of the world has everything and still questions like, who am I to be in Courtney Cox's house? You're
Yeah.
like, you're freaking Prince Harry,
Right.
So it's amazing to me that it's such a human quality.
It absolutely is. But we have to let the listeners know how we deal with it.
Yeah.
And the way I handle it is that I treat it as a constant. It's a constant, it's there, but it is not the determinative factor of what I can or can't do. And
Yep.
and lots of different people deal with this in a different way. If someone doubts them, athletes have really said, like, if people doubt them, that lights a fire under them, right? I've heard someone else say it takes a bit of rage and anger to really change human behavior. I've heard Tony Robbins say that, you have to be disgusted enough with something or sick and tired of something to find insight to jump through that window of making
Right.
change, right?
A pain point.
So yeah, a pain point. Exactly. So however way works for you, and there's no, like, I want to dispel the myth that there's one size fits all, there's one way to
Right.
do any of this stuff. However works for you, it ultimately revolves around the fact of just letting it be there,
Right.
expecting it to show up, but also knowing that that doesn't have to determine whether you do it or not.
Exactly. It's like being upset that the sun came out.
Yeah.
You know it's going to come out every day. It's not a surprise.
Right.
Right? But yet being upset about it doesn't serve you, right? Or believing that means something that it doesn't. It's just there. It's kind of like white noise.
Right.
And so that's exactly what I wanted to kind of get into with you, Dinesh, is how do we do that? How do we help the listeners get out of their own way? And I think what you said about creating awareness and then just noticing it as a constant, the thing that comes up for me when you say that is, in order to do that, you have to be aware of what the voice is saying, but not judge it or judge yourself in the process, right? Like, there has to be a true curiosity of simply like, this is a black mic,
Right.
I am wearing a shirt.
Right.
Simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there. And that it sounds simple.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean it's easy. It's a
Yeah.
skill. So no matter where, listeners, you are in your own personal development journey, recognize that each one of these things that we're going to go into is a lifetime practice.
Right.
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 So it doesn't matter what Dinesh and I, where we're at, or where your wife or husband or kid is at, or your whatever is at. Meet yourself where you are.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I always tell like coaching clients, especially because they're like, well, I want to get here. And I'm like, yeah, but think about when you put your phone, for example, you pull up Apple Maps or whatever, right? And you're saying, I want to get to the grocery store. If you don't acknowledge the fact that you're at home, that's your starting point, all the directions will be incorrect.
Right.
Like you can tell it that you're at Neiman Marcus and you want to get to the grocery store, but those directions won't get you there because you're not at Neiman Marcus. You're at home. Right. So just acknowledge where you're at, and it doesn't have to mean anything other than you're just here.
Yeah. And I think the first step is just, training yourself to understand that you're not your thoughts, and your thoughts don't have to dictate what you're capable of or what you're possible, what's possible for you, and what you can try and what you can't try.
Right.
And I think that that's really just the first step, is listening to that inner dialogue, recognizing that a lot of it is negative. If you're one of the 70% of people that have inner dialogue, and start to step back a little bit and observe, where is it holding you back? Where are you being driven into a corner or a box or a certain direction, right? Let's keep it neutral, a certain direction. And is that in alignment, or is that something that you feel that is the only possible option for you? Or can we unpack that a little bit, and can we take a look and say, well, is it true that something else is not possible for me?
Right. Absolutely. Right. And I think that clarity that we so badly want comes from, like you said, taking a step back, figuring out, like, are my values and my actions aligned? If I want to spend more time with my family, that's where my values lie. But I continuously choose to go out and party and go to the gym and spend, an extra 2 or 3 hours at work, or take the long way home. And then I'm beating myself up because I'm not spending time with my family. Well, I'm setting myself up for an impossible road. Right. So when your values and your actions start to kind of fall in sync, and then your guards will pipe up here too and say, yeah, but you can't do that. Right. You can't work less. How dare you? Like, your brain will argue for all the reasons why you should continue to stay on the path that you're on, while making yourself miserable, and saying, like, well, what I want is not what I'm getting.
Yeah. Not only that, your brain will also offer you the opinion, the hypothetical, made up, totally imaginary, and largely false opinions of other people, right? What will they think? What will they say? Maybe it's going to be embarrassing. Maybe that, who am I to do that? In relative to other people, right? And I can assure you, there's a concept called the spotlight effect. And the spotlight effect is one where we are thinking more about ourselves than other people are thinking about us. And if you like, nah, Dinesh, that's not true. I think about a lot of other people. Ask yourself, do you know someone that watches a lot of football, or watches a lot of sports, or loves playing pool, or whatever it is, right? And do you do that as well? And if the answer is no, I want you to ask yourself, like, do you look down at that person for watching sports? Or do you look down at that person for going to the gym? Or do you look down to that person for reading, sci-fi novels or things like that? And I'm willing to bet that for most of us, the answer is no. You're just like, yeah, that's what the person likes. Like, that's who they are. Let them do it, right? And that is exactly what they're thinking about us. That is exactly what they're thinking about us. And like, oh, that's what that person likes. That's how they want to spend the time. Cool. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And even when it's not, like, I had a conversation with someone a while back, and it was about their kids not listening to them. Yeah. Right. And what I proposed was it always can be traced back to you and your own self dialogue and your own perception of where you fall in comparison with the circumstance or the other people that you're contending with, right? So to take the example of like your kids not listening, right? You can make it about like, oh, my kids aren't listening, it's them. However, the root of that is like, no, but you're not being heard, right? Like you're not feeling heard, which is a very need. It's a need for humans to, but then what are you making that mean? You're not being heard. Are you telling yourself then that you'll never be heard, that you're not important, that they don't want to listen to you? Like, I don't know, there's a million different outs here. So just consider when you look around and you wonder about whether or not people are going to say or do "log kya kahenge," that spotlight effect exists. And if you are making it about yourself, that's just another breadcrumb as to how you're getting in your own way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, from a really practical perspective, what we want to just leave you with is, listen to yourself. And if you find yourself coming up with reasons of why something's not possible, you can't do something right now, it's not for you, or any other type of reason, just sit with the reason and spend 5 minutes. That's it, 5 minutes questioning whether it's true or not.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Questioning whether it's true or not and divorcing yourself of that true or false, that right or wrong, good or bad. Like when you get curious about the 1,000 different ways this could work or what else might be true concurrently to something else that you're thinking, then you sort of start to open up your eyes to, infinite possibility, honestly. And that's what makes it so fun. Keeping an open mind about when you are, I suck or I'm falling short. Well, that's just one way of looking at things. What else might be true?
Absolutely.
Dinesh, I know you and I both are huge on gratitude as well. Like just I think for me, when I wake up and I start becoming aware that I'm thinking I've fallen short, the first thing I do is move to gratitude. All right, what can I be thankful about in this moment? And it can be something as simple as like, I have breath in my lungs. That's not true for everyone.
Yeah.
I'm in a soft bed. It's warm. I don't know. And pick whatever you want, right? Whatever works for you. But just to start thinking with gratitude, so that you can start to turn down. I loved the analogy you used about just turning down the volume of your ego or critic or inner guard, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And, for a lot of guys, a gratitude practice or something along words along those lines might seem like, a waste of time or we don't have time for it. But we all have appreciation. We can all appreciate the things that we have in our lives, and that's just a different way of saying gratitude. And as you know, Seema, on Instagram, I have a broadcast channel for the 5 a.m. exclusive club, and I'm pretty darn consistent. I wake up at 5 o'clock most days. Now, there are days where I stay up later, or I'm traveling, or I'm just like, I can't do it today. And so today was one of those days. I slept in till about, I think 7, maybe 7:30. And the reason for that is because I have a crushing migraine right now. Right. And I was in bed, and Anjana woke up at 5 o'clock, and she worked out, and then she came running into the room, and I'm like this. I'm holding my head. I've got a headache, and she's like, "Can you do something with me for 1 minute?" I was like, "No," and then I was like, "No, what is it? What is it?" And she's like, "I got to ask you 5 questions." I was like, "Okay, what are the 5 questions?" And I can't remember all of them, but it was like, think of like your favorite food. Think of like a sunset that you love. Think about your favorite place. And there's a couple others, but it was, along those lines. And so I answered them, and she was like, "Congratulations, you just did gratitude for the morning."
Ah!
Right. And I promise you, I promise you, there was a ever so slight shift in everything about me. And I was ready to get out of bed. I was ready to stop saying to myself that, "Oh, you've got a migraine today. You deserve to sleep in." And I woke up, got my coffee, and did some stuff with the kids, and then came down here, and my daughter went to ballet, and Jayon is doing his homework right now. And, I am just grateful that she didn't let the self-talk in her head say that, you know what, he's tired, he's worked really hard, I should let him sleep, and just went for it and just asked me those questions. And
Mm-hmm.
so, listeners, the only thing I got to say for 2024 is let's make it the year where we go for it.
Absolutely. Take massive imperfect action. What that means is just what Dinesh said, like, go for it. It's not going to be perfect. And that's where, that's where our greatest gifts lie, is discovering how we're, honestly reframing it like, okay, I'm falling short. Well, how, what did that uncover? Like, when you can really approach life with this, like, yeah, okay, I hear you. I'm falling short. I'm messing up. I'm not good enough. So what do I want to do?
Yeah.
Empower yourself to ask yourself that question. What do I want to do to get better? Why?
Right.
Like, how will that really help me? And not only just me, help the people around me. How will that help me find more fulfillment, love, connection, trust, joy, ease, peace, freedom, whatever it may be?
Yeah.
And, to kind of wrap up with my final thoughts, at least, I know, Dinesh, we've talked about this before, but I think mental health in our communities specifically it cannot be talked about enough.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're feeling really stuck, go see a therapist. If you need help, like, please go get help. If you are content with where you're at and there's a next level waiting for you, look at hiring a coach or joining a peer advisory group. Sometimes, there's a lot of research behind philanthropy, and finding a way to spend your time giving back to others really shifts how you talk about yourself and how you see yourself when you spend time giving back. So various ways to kind of help yourself get unstuck from what everybody has in their life, which is the inner guard.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, we may not know who you are or in this moment that you're listening to this podcast, but I really believe, and I'm speaking for Seema on behalf of both of us, I really believe this deep down in our minds and our hearts that you are more than you know.